Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, February 3rd, 2011. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, Chris Colby and I introduce the next Brew Your Own magazine Basic Brewing Radio collaborative experiment. When does your mash actually finish converting those starches into sugar? And Steve Wilkes and I catch up on cider, lagering, and other things homebrewing related. If you're new to homebrewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. On Facebook, I am at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And our show page on Facebook is Basic Brewing. No, it's facebook.com/basicbrewing. Too many URLs in my head. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us and click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you this show, and we appreciate your support. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. And you can find our Basic Brewing iPhone and Android apps on their respective stores, and we're also on the BlackBerry podcast directory, too. Let's look into the mailbag before we go on. Robert writes in with this: I have a brew club, and until recently it was just 3 people. We are now up to 5 and would like to grow even more. Our club is in the Northwest Colorado, or our club is the Northwest Colorado Brew Club. Our website is nwcbrew.com. I'm not a store or a commercial enterprise, just an obsessed homebrewer. Well, who isn't? I would love to get our club mentioned on your show to hopefully grow our membership. We meet informally at this time and do not collect dues. So there you go. If you're in the Northwest Colorado area and want to get in on the ground floor of a growing homebrewing club, check out nwcbrew.com. The episode last week with Darnell Bronner on preheating grains in a sealed bag in strike water as you heat up the strike water to your saccharification rest temperature generated some response. This is from John in Antioch, California. John says, some time ago during one of my brew days and enjoying the company of your podcast about home malting, I forgot to remove the grains from the refrigerator so they can acclimate to room temperature. Listening to the home malting podcast gave me the idea to preheat the grains in the oven to 150 degrees before adding them to the water. Using this method gets me within a degree or two of my target temps. Another technique would be to add the grain to the water and heat them together to reach your target temps. As for the time saved or any flavor differences, I haven't done side-by-side comparisons. So there you go. John preheats his grain in the oven to 150 degrees before he adds them to the strike water. I'd be interested to see if that adds any kind of roast to the roast character to the grains. But he also mentions just adding the grains loose into the strike water at room temperature and raising it up to your target temperature. Darnell and I speculated on that last week, but I think I said that it would probably work, but it might change the character of the beer because you're going to be running through all of those mash rest temperatures and activating a lot more enzymes than just the ones you want to target if you do a single infusion mash. Well, Steve from Tennessee writes, it's very reasonable to brew in a bag and start the grains at room temperature water. He says nothing much happens below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, so time can be taken to break up the dough balls. Heating the mash from 80 degrees Fahrenheit to 155 degrees Fahrenheit will go through all known mash steps. Understanding mash steps are really temperature stages. A slow heating, say 2 to 3 degrees per minute, does mash the grains at all known mash steps, so be aware the beers may not need a ramp/step mash. Steve continues, the beer will be thinner if the ramp slows down around 140 to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, but the mash will have highly fermentable wort, and if the mash slows at 150 to 160, it will have more body but be less fermentable. The ramp from 93 degrees Fahrenheit will break down proteins. So if there is not a lot of proteins, the beer will have less head. I always toss in a half a pound of quick oats to get good foam. So there you go. If you just ramp up from room temperature, you will probably have a beer that is different from a beer that you would have if you would just select your favorite single infusion mash temperature and put the grains in there. Then there are these comments from Kai Troyster, who you've heard several times on the show, and heard him talk about his experiments with mash efficiency and fermentability. Kai says, I doubt that the time savings are coming from preheating the grain. They are most likely due to the insulating effects of the bag of grain. I can heat water or wort much faster when I keep the lid on, which is what I do. Technically, there is a small difference, though. The hotter an object is, the more heat it loses to the environment. This means you would need a little more energy and thus time to heat the water to a higher temperature than you need to heat the water and grain to a lower temperature, but I doubt that this could account for the 4 minutes difference, though. Kai says, I don't think there are adverse effects to heating the grain. In the literature, there are some references to the fact that in mashing enzymes are oftentimes shocked at dough-in, and that one of the advantages of a lower temperature dough-in is not shocking those, I suppose. However, with the abundance of enzymes in today's pale or Pilsner malts, this is not seen as a problem. Kai says, I've given up on using strike water temperature calculators as well, since I can directly heat my mash tun. I just aim low for the strike water temperature and then heat the complete mash to the first rest temperature. If you brew in a bag, you could do this as well, but make sure you move the mash around by stirring or moving the bag with the grain. Yes, be careful you don't do what I did last time. I did a brew in a bag for these small batches that we're going to use for an experiment coming up. And it was a smaller kettle than I was used to, and the excess bag top draped over the side of the kettle and actually wound up melting part of my bag. We all know how painful that can be. As you'll hear shortly, I hope to have Kai on the show next week to help us decipher the results of that experiment. So stay tuned for that. But before next week, before that experiment, I want to recruit you to help us out on another experiment in the mash tun. How long does it take for modern grains to convert the starches in the malt to sugar? Well, that's the subject of the next BYO-BBR collaborative experiment. Well, Chris Colby, welcome back again to Basic Brewing Radio.
James, thanks for having me on the program.
Experiment number 7. And we're going to do something that's fairly easy this time, and it is fairly, I hope to be fairly easily quantifiable. I mean, here in the past we've had taste the difference or observe the difference between beers handled in certain ways. This time we've got something that can be measured in a more kind of objective way, right?
Yes.
What are we doing?
What we're going to do is the amount of time it takes for your mash to convert. In a lot of homebrew recipes, standard mash time, people give it as 60 minutes. And, I think therefore, there at least some brewers probably think that, well, you need 60 minutes for a full conversion. And that's actually, or at least reputedly, not the case. So what we would like to do is test for how long does it actually take a mash to convert, on a homebrew scale. So our idea is participating brewers in this experiment, all you really need to do is just if you're brewing an all-grain beer or if you're brewing a partial mash beer, is on brew day, take a wort sample every 5 minutes, do a starch iodine test, and just record that series and tell us how long it takes till your mash is converted. And we're going to be looking for several different things in the experiment. One is the effect of different kinds of malt. You know, you know, 6-row malt, U.S. domestic 6-row malt, and U.S. domestic 2-row, reputedly has a much higher enzymatic content than either, continental pilsner or English pale ale malt. That's what everyone says, and we'd like to see if in real time in a home brewing scale if that actually makes a difference in your conversion time. Also, stirred versus unstirred mashes. A lot of homebrewers mash in and in order to conserve temperature, they don't disturb their mash during the mash. Let it sit there, and we'd like to test in unstirred mashes, and we'd also like to test in stirred mashes. And we're especially looking for if you really want to do that part right, brew the same beer twice in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It's same grain bill, stirred versus unstirred. But I mean, the nice thing about this experiment is you don't have to brew 2 beers. You can just do it on a single beer and just report to us what your grain bill was, what your mash temperature was, what the mash thickness was, whether it's stirred or unstirred, and then your series of mash results. So there's the interesting questions here are how long does it take, how do the different malts affect it, and does stirring affect it? And we think this is a nice little experiment. We're guaranteed to get a result. As James mentioned, it's very objective. A starch iodine test is either the sample turns black or it doesn't, or purpley black. There can be some on the edge. There's some sort of equivocal things, but you eventually get to a point where either the test is positive or negative, and that's about it. That's our experiment.
Yeah, we should probably back up a little bit for people who don't do all grain or partial mash brews yet. When you're talking about conversion, you're talking about the enzymes in the malted grain during the mash rest, converting starches in the grain into sugars that the yeast can eat. And if you take a sample of wort and drip some drops of the red iodine solution into a sample of wort, if there is starch present in that sample, that iodine will turn either black or a purplish black. It will visibly change colors. And if you don't have any starches in there, it'll stay the exact same color as it came out of the dropper, right?
Right.
So there are some guidelines that you want to use. How should people do a proper iodine test?
That's a good question. Ideally, what you'd want would be like a clean, a hard, white surface to do the iodine test on. As James and I were talking earlier, don't use paper plates. Paper plates are made out of
starchy paper.
Starchy paper, and your iodine test is going to be positive, forever, because your wort's going to be sitting on something that has starches in it. But some people use, just like a dinner plate or whatever. You can use any variety of things, porcelain or glass or whatever. And basically, what you do is you'll want to take a sample of your wort, and all you need is a drop or two. You'll want to, when you take the sample, you want to avoid getting any solids in it. You don't want any husks. You don't want any, obviously big chunks of ground grain, the endosperm. But you want, wort, just plain wort. Put a couple drops in, on your sample surface, and then just take a small drop of iodine and mix it in there. And all you need to do to mix is just add the drop to the top, and at that volume, they'll mix. Wait a very short amount of time, and the reaction occurs. Takes a few seconds, but not that long, and you'll have your answer.
Now,
and a positive test, meaning that starch is present, the sample turns a dark color. It's either for a lot of starch it's almost black, and for lesser amounts it gets sort of into a purplish reddish sort of black. And a negative test, meaning that the starches have all been degraded to a point that at least the test can't detect them. That is it. is no color change. Basically, it looks like the color of wort with whatever color that the iodine solution itself adds without the reaction occurring.
Now we have to give credit to Zot O'Connor, who suggested this through Twitter the last time that we were looking for BYO-BBR collaborative experiment ideas. I tweeted out there, and several people answered, and I collected those and I put them in a Word document that you and I went over. And there are some other ideas in that that we will probably use later on. So we're still mining that information. But Zod O'Connor, who has participated in our experiments in the past, suggested this. And also he said you could use one of those pill boxes. You can get them, with 7 segments, one for, labeled for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. If you have elderly relatives, you've seen these, or if you take daily medication, you may have these. Don't use a used one, but he said that he suggested you take one of these little pill containers, and if you could find one that has 2 weeks' worth of containers or compartments in it, that would be good. But made out of white plastic so you could see what's going on more easily. But that seems like a neat idea and an easy way that you could photograph your results, and you could send us a picture along with your data to show us what your samples look like.
Yeah, that would work. Also, if you've ever worked in a chemistry lab, you'll know there are little plates that have, porcelain plates with multiple wells. And if you happen to, work somewhere where you have access to that, borrow it for a day, and that would be cool too. I wonder if actually a birth control pill container would work, because then you'd have 28 little samples all in a row. Is
there starch in birth control pills? I don't know. Would there be any residue in there?
I don't know. I don't even know if the case is white, so...
Be inventive with the way you collect the data is what we're saying. But so we're looking for the effect of different grains, how powerful the enzymatic reaction is in those different grains. We're looking at different mash thicknesses, so record that as well. We're looking at different temperatures. And we are looking at stirring versus unstirred. And we had a conversation before we started recording. One of the questions that I would have on that is if you did 2 exact same mashes back to back, didn't stir one so that you had this clear liquid on the top that you sampled from and took your test, would you get a different result from if you stirred the mash and got it all cloudy and took your tests every 5 minutes? That would be an interesting question to ask, because I don't even know if I want to. If you think that I shouldn't say this, I'll edit it out afterwards. But if my question would be, if you were getting a negative result for starch with that clear stuff that's sitting on top of the mash, but if there's starches lurking somewhere in the bottom of the mash that don't get converted, that you would see if you stirred it, are you getting a false result by not stirring it? That's, I guess, the question that I want to ask.
Well, yeah, you're getting into a little bit more detailed of a question there. There you'd be looking at, does starch conversion take place equally throughout the entire mash?
Yeah.
Or does it? I would suspect, and this is something that we could test on 2035 when we're still doing the BBR BYO experiments. But
experiment 527.
Experiment 527.
Does beer still exist?
This one was also suggested by Zod O'Connor. James and I gave up on thinking up experiments 22 years ago.
But that's another parameter that we could use the results to talk about. Also.
Yeah. But you could take what I was saying is you could take a long pipette or some sort of long tube, take samples from different portions of the mash, like down in the grains and up on top. But that's an entirely different experiment. For this one, I think we're going to ask people to take, on an unstirred mash, just take it right from the top. On a stirred mash, you take it right from the top. And also one thing you could do, although this means opening up your mash tun more often, is you could, whatever your stirring regimen is, stir, but let it sit for a minute or two before you take your sample, so you're not getting the, at least the thickest of the cloudiest, endosperm, actual, chunks of chunks of the inside of the.
Speaking of chunks,
yeah, no, just a soda pop.
Well, in theory, you could take your 5-minute sample, then stir, and then 5 minutes later take another sample, then stir.
There's a very good.
So there you go. So, but there are so many different parameters we could also be measuring with this. You could be testing gravity at each of these points if you have a refractometer. There's fermentability, there's yada, 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 which we will get into a bit with next week's experiment with Charles Hoffman, which I will discuss in a little more detail with my discussion with Steve in the second half of the show. But we're just going to concentrate on just this one parameter this time, and that's just, does the iodine change colors, or when does the iodine stop changing colors in your mash with the details that you record? Right.
And as always, we'll have, I'll have a write-up of the experimental protocol on my blog, and we'll have on James's site, we'll have the forms that you can download, for all the questions to send us. So it'll be like every other experiment. And I believe we were setting the deadline for the end of February.
Yeah, the last day of the month. So easy to remember, the 28th of February, the last day of the month. It's a shorter deadline. Pardon me. It's a shorter deadline, but we think
you don't have to ferment your beer out and condition it and all that. All you need to do is...
Exactly. It's just the mash, and you can just do it with one. You can choose to do one stirred and one unstirred, or you can just do the one. Just let us know which one you did. Yep. So easy. What do you think?
I think this should be a good one. I think we're bound to get a number from it, and or hopefully a series of numbers if multiple people do mashes with 6-row grain, if multiple people do it with 2-row, if multiple people do it with, like, say, a Pilsner, malt, a German malt versus a domestic. I think we'll have a lot of scattered results because there'll be different mash temperatures and different. But I think we'll have enough. I think we should have enough data from just all the different people to make, to have some actual meaningful numbers. It's going to be interesting to detect, does most of the conversion happen sort of late, sort of closer to the 60-minute mark, or does it all happen, within 5-10 minutes, and then, if you're continuing to mash out or mash for an hour, does it, just sit there?
Right.
Or does it happen somewhere in the middle? Is it consistent between malts and mash temperatures, or does it spread out across? There's, I think we're going to have an interesting data set here, and hopefully the more people participate in this one, the better our results will be. And given that it's going to be really such an easy thing to do, you've got just sort of one added task on brew day, if you're an all-grain brewer or a partial mash brewer, that hopefully collect a nice data set for this.
There you go. Well, we'll talk to you later, Chris. Thanks.
Okay, James.
Well, thanks again to Chris, who is editor of Brew Your Own magazine, by the way. Also, by the way, if you click on the BYO ad on basicbrewing.com, you can get a free issue of the magazine. And if you decide to subscribe after that, you'll be helping to support the show, and we greatly appreciate that. Now, this is an experiment that you can take part in, even if you haven't taken the step into all-grain brewing. And here's what you can do. Go to your homebrew store and buy a pound or half a kilogram of any base malt, and they can tell you which are the base malts, and you could find something, exotic to play with, base malt-wise. If you don't have a grain mill, they'll be glad to mill it for you. Take that home, heat 2 quarts of water or 2 liters to 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 70 C. Add the grains to the water and stir it up well. And take the temperature of your mixture, make a note of that, and there you've got a mash. And you should be well within the range to convert those starches into sugar. Now, if this is the first time you've ever done any mashing, what I would suggest is you stick your finger in the mash and taste it and see what it tastes like before those starches are converted, and then you can taste it later and see what a difference it makes. But after you get everything doughed in, mixed in, wait 5 minutes. Take a sample of the liquid, put it onto a white porcelain plate, and drop a couple of drops of iodine on there. Record your result. Wait 5 minutes. Do it again. If you want to use this wort that you're making, this all-grain wort that you're making in a partial mash beer, you can just line your kettle with a big nylon bag, and brew in a bag, and you're in business. Just take out the bag and the grains at the end of that mash and proceed from there. One note to remember after you've added the iodine to your wort sample, of course, don't drink it, don't taste it, and make sure that no interested pets or kids do either. I'm looking forward to hearing your results. Now, this past week, Steve Wilkes and I recorded a video episode on making a simple cider. Very tasty. And afterwards, we came up into the audio studio to catch up on a few things. Well, Steve, welcome back to the studio.
Studio A. Thanks for having me back.
Here above the garage. Wanted to talk about 3 things that we've been doing lately, kind of to catch up, on some interesting stuff that we've been doing. Today we did our show on cider, the Basic Brewing video show.
That's right.
And I wanted to kind of talk about that and kind of delve into more, a little more detail than we do on the video side of things, and to because we've been talking about doing a cider for a long time.
Long time. I threatened to do it like 2 years ago.
and I I've been wanting to do it with local fruit, but I forget every year. In fact, there's an orchard across the street from my house.
Yeah,
a small one where you go and pick your own fruit. For free, I think, even.
Oh, it is. We went and picked apples there this year. Gretchen filled the refrigerator. My wife filled the refrigerator with these apples.
So you had cider on the hoof there.
Yeah, we did.
And you didn't do anything about it.
No, we didn't.
Well, it's just something you got to do. So what I did, the way I stumbled into it was I went to the grocery store and I saw these 1-gallon jugs of unfiltered 100% apple cider.
Right.
It's pasteurized.
But no additives.
But no additives.
No added sugar.
No added sugar, no added nothing.
Right.
It had the sediment at the bottom. I thought, I'm just going to pitch some yeast into that. Mm-hmm. So I did.
And it was good.
So I put a packet of champagne yeast in it. And it did come out dry. Mm-hmm. And I noticed a couple of things. In the fermentation with this cider, usually with beer, you get a foam on the top, you get a krausen on the top, and you have to leave some space in the fermenter for that.
Right.
With this cider, I didn't get any of that. The cider just got more cloudy, and then when it was done, it settled back out into having a sediment at the bottom.
So it did flocculate.
Yeah,
reasonably well.
Yeah, I mean there was still a bunch of apple junk and yeast in the bottom of the cider.
Yeah,
but what I wish I had done is what we did today on the video. Is just pitch yeast into the cider bottle, into the cider jug.
Because it's already sterilized in there.
Yeah, it's pasteurized, it's sanitized.
Yeah.
All you got to do is add our own bugs. And we'll see what happens with that today.
Of course, that's the really low-tech cider way.
Yeah.
You could, if you have an orchard nearby, you could go to the trouble of going to the orchard and pressing your own apples, getting an apple press or a fruit press. Or I suspect that a cider mill would provide you with unpasteurized must. I don't know juice if you wanted it, and then you could just leave it alone because it's going to have its own. If it's unpasteurized, it's going to be buggy. It's going to have yeast on it.
Yeah.
Of course, you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, well, that's
in
the
that
thing.
Sense.
That's the thing is you will get kind of there is a kind of a, in the wine world, they say, what is it, terroir, which is the character of the wine that comes from the region where it's grown.
That's right.
I guess in that case, with the cider that is unfiltered or unpasteurized, you get both the local fruit and you get the local bugs.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's going to take longer probably to ferment and may take longer to get to a drinkable state.
Yeah.
You may have to leave it in the fermenter for a while longer. With this, it was done fermenting, in like a week or so. I left it in the primary jug for a couple of weeks and then transferred that off of the sediment. I wound up with like half a gallon of cider in the growler in the fridge because I had left room. I had taken off like a quart to leave room for the activity of the fermentation, which didn't happen. And then I had, about a quart of sediment stuff in the bottom that I racked it off of. I guess I could have just, although there was yeast in that, I guess I could have just bottled that in there too. But
yeah.
Anyway, it was tasty. It was dry because of the champagne yeast. But what I could have done is to take some potassium sorbate and inhibited the yeast activity and then sweetened on top of that.
Right.
To avoid further fermentation.
Yep.
Which is basically what we did on the video show. We poured the dry cider, tasted it. It tasted pretty good. It still tastes pretty good.
I thought it was good. It was, your description was right on. It was actually quite neutral. And the yeast didn't really affect the flavor profile that I could tell. It still tasted like apples. It was dry. And not overly alcoholic. I think you said the original gravity was like 1048.
1048.
So you didn't really get a big alcohol buzz off of it, but
about
definitely
5% because it actually fermented down because of the champagne yeast. It fermented down lower than 1.0. It was like 0.998 or something like that. So probably 5% alcohol. I don't know.
Well, you could certainly tell you're drinking an alcoholic beverage, but it wasn't like drinking a hot wine.
Right.
Like when you first make a wine, it's like, oh man, that thing's hot. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, it's completely drinkable. And it'll be interesting to see what we did today was we just poured a little bit off of a new jug of cider just to sweeten our dry ciders in the glass, and we just pitched some Safale US-05 on top of that in the jug, and we waited until it hydrated and shook it up, and I actually just put a piece of foil over the top of it and put it in the bathtub in the guest room. So
we're getting lower tech and more hillbilly by the day.
Prison cider.
That's right. Get your San Quentin cider here, folks.
Yeah, next will be the bread yeast.
Well, yeah.
Which I actually to change gears I actually used yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about this. I'm looking at 3 jugs. One says 10 minutes, one says 30 minutes, the other one says 60 minutes.
Yeah, this is for a future episode here coming up soon. I'm working with a listener, and he has sent some beer. Charles is his name. He asked, because we talked on the show with Chris Colby where we were saying that allegedly today's base grains are so well modified that they could convert in, say, 10 or 15 minutes. So Charles was saying, well, if they could convert in 10 or 15 minutes, why are we mashing for a full hour? So the test was to do a 10-minute mash, a 30-minute mash, and a 60-minute mash and compare the difference between the three. And
cool.
I hope to get I haven't talked to Kai about this, but I hope to get some input from Kai, if not have him on the show, to kind of examine our data, examine our results.
Yeah.
And there are some differences in the 3 methods. And what I did was I took 2 pounds of two-row in each of the batches with 1 gallon of water and did a mash, brew in a bag, and boiled it off for an hour with some hops in there.
Right.
And then I pitched a packet of bread yeast into each one. And then let it ferment. And actually, it looks like it's done. It looks like I pitched that yesterday.
Wow.
And it looks like the bread yeast just, ran right through
already done its work.
that beer. So anyway, the goal is not to have drinkable beer. The goal is to look at original gravity numbers and to look at final gravity numbers and to see what effect that the different mash times have on efficiency, how much sugar we get out of the mash,
right,
and how fermentable those sugars are. So anyway, that's coming up. I just wanted to kind of give a preview of that. That was it was a fun thing to do and interesting to juggle 3 all grain batches of beer, even though they're small, in one day. With one. I did the 10-minute mash first, and then the 30-minute mash second, and then so anyway, it was.
Well, I'm anxious to see what it comes out. It'll be interesting to see because if you could knock 30 minutes off of your. Boy, those brew days get long, But, I'm not going to comment further because I want to hear the results.
Yeah. So you have been brewing lately as well, and this is we've done lagers together.
Yes, that's
on
right.
multiple occasions, but this is your first flying solo lager.
Yeah. Boy, I feel like a big boy. Well, my brew house just doesn't lend itself to lagering, and so I've just never gone there. I don't really have the space. I don't have the dedicated space. I can leave things alone. I don't have a cooling system, except I did.
You didn't know it.
And I didn't know it. So, so I made a Vienna lager, and it's in the primary fermentation right now. It's pretty much all just Vienna malt, and I think I believe the recipe was 11 pounds of Vienna malt and 1 pound of 90 Levabon crystal and 2 ounces of Tattniger at 60 minutes. That's it. And Old Bavarian lager yeast. So real straightforward beer. Final gravity, or the original gravity, was like 1060 or something. It was bigger actually than I kind of thought it would be, but I'm pleased with that. And it's just bubbling away. But what I found was that my wine refrigerator, so the place where we store our wines, in the little rack with a clear door, and all that. And it was actually your suggestion because I was, racking my brain. Well, how am I going to really do this since I don't really have the space to set up the LTLS or all that? And I kind of resigned myself the night of the brew to, I'm just going to have to do a hybrid and I'm just going to leave it alone at that. And then I got up the next morning and I said, James suggested that might work, and so I yanked all the wine out of there and the shelves. And
while your wife wasn't looking,
no, I was dreading telling her that I'd done this, but anyway, the 5-gallon carboy fit perfectly, and I didn't, and it's fermenting away at 52 degrees.
There you go.
And the yeast is 50 to 55 degree fermentation, where the manufacturer says it's happy, and so I'm thrilled. It's just doing its little bloop bloop right now, and I'll leave it in there for about 2 weeks and then put it on a secondary and leave it for a while longer and bottle it up, and we'll see what we get.
Yeah, we had talked. We actually ran into each other down at the homebrew shop, Andy's homebrew shop, and you were talking about, I'd like to do a Vienna lager, but I don't know. And I wrote an article for Brew Your Own magazine that's coming out soon. I solicited information on Facebook from brewers, besides using a chest freezer and the electronic controller, how do you do lagering? And some say they take a big bucket, basically, and they put ice water in there, and they kind of have to manually, control how much ice is in there. Others say, in the wintertime, my garage is perfect temperature, there's this one space in the basement that's perfect, or but some said that they use these little wine fridges, and so I said, well, you've got one of those little wine fridges, and you said, well, my wife would never let me take the wine.
And then she's like, what are you doing with my wine? But she was cool,
Well, I think she'll like that style, though.
Well, actually, that's what I told her. I said, this will be a really good beer. I think you'll like this. And she just grinned at me and said, it's okay.
She indulged you. Well, so it'll be interesting. So how do you, you're in the primary fermentation right now. How do you, because in some areas of the country, theoretically, you could just kind of set it outside or set it like in the garage or something like that. But now, like here in Northwest Arkansas, it's going to be 60-something degrees today, and next week we're supposed to get winter weather.
Yeah, I know.
So it's crazy to try to use the natural elements around here to have any kind of,
Well, and I'm storing all my gold bullion in my limestone caves, so
those
are taken up. I can't do that. Actually, what I
Fort Wilkes.
Yeah, that's right. There's $1.25 and change. Anyway, what I'm thinking about doing, I think what I really will do is get one of those buckets, and I'll do cool water with a little bit of ice to store it for, because I can't keep the wine fridge for the next 3 months or whatever. So I think that's what I'm going to end up doing for the lagering period, and I'll just see how long I lager. I probably lager the shortest amount of time that's reasonable.
Well, and primary fermentation, the yeast is still very active.
Right.
You really need to keep them happy and at a steady temperature. So, the wine fridge is great for that, but you could put it in an ice bucket, and not have to worry so much about temperature fluctuations during long-term lagering.
Right.
And it'd be a lot easier just to keep the ice in there.
Yeah.
And keeping the beer cold.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what I'm going to end up doing. But I'm really excited about this because I'm sure that I'm not alone in this. I've always been interested in really being a lager brewer. I like lager beers. But because of the limitations of my brewery, I've never done it. I've never gone there. So I'm really excited. It's like there's this whole world of beers now that I enjoy buying the commercial versions of or craft versions of. And now maybe I can go there. Like I have a real interest in brewing a pre-Prohibition American Pilsner. I've always wanted to brew that beer, but knew that I couldn't do it justice. Well, now I feel like I can. So I've got my eyes open for another one of those little wine fridges that I can have for my very own.
And those aren't the ones that I was looking at. Like yours, they're not cheap. It's like $350 something.
Yeah,
like that.
a new one at the local big box store here is like $280 plus tax. But I bought the one that we have off of a friend for $50.
Oh, there you go.
So hello classifieds.
Yeah.
Or Craigslist or whatever, and then, you'll find one. And, of course, a lot of people have, old refrigerators or old freezers, and they can put different, and I know that that's a common thing to do. Again, my problem is just the way my house is. We don't live in an apartment, but we don't have a lot of room left over, just the way the house is configured. So I have to be very economical in how I use the footprint that I take up. So
and that's like me, where we've got a deep freeze, as we say here, down in the basement, but it's a vertical one, and it's got the shelves that you can't remove, and we use it for food.
Right.
And so I don't have room for another big chest freezer in the house. But one of those little wine fridges, you might be able to find some room for something like that. But it's I can't wait. I can't wait to. And it's exciting that you've kind of stumbled on that, and who knows what you.
You never know.
Well, thanks for taking time again.
Oh, this is fun.
We're sipping on some more cider.
Yep.
And look forward. We'll get back together when the USO5 cider turns out.
I think it'll be interesting to see what the different. I'm starting to think about other cider experiments with different yeasts and different apple blends. It's kind of exciting.
Adjunct ingredients and such.
Yeah. Throw a lot of brown sugar and stuff in there. And
well, hey.
Oh.
Now you're talking.
Well, okay.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Well, happy brewing.
Always fun to get together with Steve, and looking forward to his lager and our second batch of simple cider. Well, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. You can look at our DVDs on our website, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing. Also, our 2011 Brewers Logbooks are in stock. And you can also see our other DVDs as well. Stepping into all grain, low-tech lagering and decoction mashing, and introduction to wine kits as well. And yes, the low-tech lagering DVDs are back in stock. The shipment from the distributor or the manufacturer beat the snow and ice. So they're in stock. And I will hop in the Subaru, brave the icy roads, and take them to the post office if you want one. We got combo deals to save you a few bucks if you want to buy more than one DVD at a time, and you can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store too. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them online in our online shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com associate link. We appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Beyond Fetch, fun interactive activities for you and your dog, and original Swedish goggles. Thanks again, everybody. Remember, I can't tell who bought what, so no worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site the next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we appreciate your support. Don't forget, you can also join the American Homebrewers Association or subscribe to BYO Magazine through our associate links on basicbrewing.com too. That's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.